From Baltimore, Maryland, this is the Stoop Sessions, a One Hope podcast. Join us for conversations about ministry on the stoop. Learn more about our work at www.onehope.gives.
Here we are on another stoop of a member of the Garden Church. I'm glad they let us use their stoops.
Yeah, and quickly. We kind of just figure out what stoop we're stopping
We do
on.
ask for permission before
true.
we
30 seconds before, and we have very kind members. But here we are, and today I was just thinking about...
Well, who are you?
Oh, I forgot already.
We got to remember.
Okay. Child of God. No, my name is Stephanie Greer.
And I am Joel Kurz.
Yeah. And that is a vehicle passing by. So yeah, we're on the stoop, and I was really edified by my conversation with James Choi.
Yeah.
And so as I was thinking about it, we thought, hey, let's talk about this just a little bit further. Let's talk about work, the working church. And again, we kind of defined that the working church is not necessarily people who work, but church life in every member and how it works. So
Yeah. From a discipling perspective, are we doing a good job thinking through work, thinking through rest? Some of the conversations that I've had with folks, even on the idea of the working church, is, man, I love the concept. I love the idea of, like, let's be active and engaged in evangelizing and discipling and visiting and hospitality. But at the same time, I'm tired and
exhausted.
I'm overworked, I'm exhausted.
And I always feel like I'm busy. So I thought work and rest would be a really good conversation for us to have because, you kind of hear, like, they met on Sundays, like believers meeting on Sundays, clearing their schedule. What does that look like? What would it require? And so I think first, for me, I feel like I'm always having these conversations with you when I come into the office, and I'm like, why do I feel burned out? Or why am I tired? How do we define this?
That's true. I think this episode is actually going to be a bit of a taste of the conversation that you and I often have.
Yeah, and I don't always
in
leave
the
in
office.
tears. Not that he makes me cry, just that I cry as I reflect. But yeah.
But sometimes you legitimately do feel probably more tired than I do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a character thing.
Yeah.
It might be that you're also a new mother of
almost
you have
3.
a child in just a couple weeks, a third one coming.
Yeah, yes, a kid comes in 6 weeks.
But this is something, though, that you're very familiar with, this idea of, like, you love the ministry, you love the work, and at the same time, you're physically tired. And
when you think about, I think in our particular context, just being part of the inner city, it's never short of an opportunity to meet up with a believer. So these are all, like, really good things.
Right.
But I remember a couple weeks ago we were talking and you said, it's crazy because sometimes you can look at all these really good things and be like, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to meet somebody for discipleship and I have to meet someone for coffee and I have to meet someone to walk through the Bible and then I've got to go to Bible study and I've got to make it to prayer. And that language in and of itself was really convicting when I'm like, these are things actually as a believer, spiritually we delight in, but they've become work, and I air quote work in a way that I think a cultural idea of work.
Yeah.
Instead of the idea of work actually being like pre-sin in the garden, delightful.
Right.
Like good to do.
Yeah, that's so good.
Helpful, productive, helping people flourish. And so already some of our conversations just start with, man, I love being in the city. It's so dense. There's so many people. There's so many opportunities. And I'm looking at even the things that I would delight in as complete burdens. So, which is why we always talk about work and rest.
Yeah, because work can feel like a burden.
It can.
And I think in some ways work is problematic. But before we talk about how it's problematic, we have to talk about how work is good.
Yeah.
Think of the first place we find work in the Bible. God works.
Yeah.
God finishes work on the seventh day and then he rested. So the first place we see actually work and rest is in the goodness of creation and God's activity and God's work.
Yeah. And he calls it good from the beginning. He saw that he had made and he saw that it was good.
Right.
So it already starts to fight our cultural issues where we're starting to think through.
That's right.
Like, oh, hi. Starting to think through the fact that, like, maybe all work is not evil. And we'll get to Ecclesiastes at some point.
Yeah.
But,
well, if you think about the fact that God is always good, he's always holy, eternally holy. He only does what is right. The very fact that God works means that work is inherently good.
Yeah.
God would not work if work was burdensome or problematic in and of itself.
Yeah.
Work is a good thing. It is a blessing that we see in creation. And I think that there is a cultural attack on work to some degree where we can see work as a bad thing in our culture.
Oftentimes the highlight for people is like, I never want to work again. And again, we need to reframe what that actually means. You know? I know. I laugh at the memes and the GIFs, the GIFs.
Whatever they're called.
Okay.
I call them GIFs.
It's a scandal, right? Where it's like, this is so like reckless. Why do we have to keep showing up to work on Mondays? I may or may not have sent a text yesterday to that same effect, but the reality is it's just how the perspective of how we think about it. And I think if we're going to talk about work, we have to talk about rest, because we have to talk about how God rested on the seventh day. And oftentimes what we think is rest is actually like a numbing or a, how can I kind of like, is it called navel gazing? I don't know these idioms. I don't know. Caribbean life, where you're just like, and then you think that was restful, but that's not actually what
just
I think God
staring
intended.
Staring at your own issues.
Gotcha.
Staring at yourself.
And so we don't even rest well. So then we're not empowered to work well.
Yeah.
So like what would be some examples?
So maybe we could think of it like this: work is good because God worked. Rest
Yeah.
is good because God worked. Work is problematic because of sin.
Yeah.
Sin enters into the world, Genesis 2, and immediately work becomes problematic. So you think of the curse to the woman. There's pain in childbearing.
There's pain in child. There's
Sorry
pain.
to let you know.
There's pain in the pre.
Yeah.
And then there's some pain. At least we get to forget the childbirth pain.
Yeah.
The other pains you don't forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what is a blessing is problematic and
It's true.
hard and painful. And then, of course, Adam is cursed. The ground is cursed. His work is cursed. If it wasn't for sin in the world, work would only be fruitful.
Yeah.
So one of the ways I think of it is, if you know how there's sometimes we get these moments where you're just killing it at work, like things are going well.
Yeah.
It's productive. It's fruitful.
Your to-do app is ready. Your meeting showed up.
Right, and it feels good. You're creating something, you're producing something.
Yeah.
So I think if it wasn't for sin, like that's a little taste of the blessing of
That'd be
work.
the adrenaline of like, let's keep doing this, let's keep doing this.
Right, but because of the curse, it's not like that. Because of the curse, probably more often than not, 90% of the time maybe, it feels actually more toilsome and problematic. It's not we don't feel like we're killing it. We feel like we have challenges, we have issues. People aren't returning emails. I am not getting the kinds of results that I'm hoping to get. The fruit on the tree is not coming as quickly as I want the fruit to come.
You've been laboring in your neighborhood for so long and sharing the gospel for so long and starting a
and
million
we've got
different
thorns
things.
and thickets growing up instead of fruit.
And there's heartbreak.
It's heartbreak, and it's very problematic because of sin.
Yeah. And we see how people abuse even a work with all your heart, like a Colossians 3:23. We see examples when man has done that horribly, like slavery. Like here you're gonna work, you're gonna toil, you're gonna do all these things in the way that I don't think God, it's not even a think. That's not what God destined for what work looks like. So people have turned work into real evil ways. And that I think that's the pushback too of like, am I a slave to X, Y, and Z? And in some ways we can be,
When you think of work as played out in the scriptures, so after Genesis 2, we see work being played out in all kinds of perverted sort of ways, in terms of slavery in Egypt. The people of God literally were being wiped out by the Egyptians through working them to
More
death.
toil,
That was their strategy.
straw,
what was a blessing was
make
used
bricks
against
happen.
them. Or we think of like a misuse of work, where in the prophets they ought to be working on rebuilding the temple, and instead they're building their own luxurious homes with wood paneling, and so there's this misuse of the gift of work instead of using it in a way that is most God glorifying
Yeah.
and building up of others, it becomes a very personal, like how can I, acquire more from me, from myself, with navel gazing, as
Yeah.
you said. And as a result, that's not a blessing. That's actually a misuse and a curse,
Yeah.
or part of the curse, with how we as fallen people use work
Yeah.
and abuse work.
Yeah, and I think it leads to two different extremes. Like one, you feel like your idea of success is actually working, and so you're like, I'm going to lean into this. The hard part about work for me, as I confess, as a, I don't know, like when it's time to be like, I used to be a workaholic. I don't know that I am now, but it's the fact that success actually produces really good things. You know what I mean? Like, work hard, toil, don't rest, keep grinding, I'll sleep when I'm dead. That kind of mentality, even in ministry, is one extreme where you're like, no, look at all the fruits of my labor. Look at all the things I'm able to do. Look at the people that are being blessed. If I step away from this, then how will this happen? If I actually say no to something, what will happen here? If I actually prioritize, I think one threat is like prioritize even the sitting under God's word and some things that doesn't even seem like work, but it's actually rejuvenating. What happens there? And so that is one extreme, is the workaholic sometimes gets fruit that says, this is all my doing, which is danger zone because it goes into pride, start to lose humility, and you probably will lead into some sort of burnout. But there's like a couple other extremes. So if we pendulum swing, I don't really know. Oh, it swings this way.
However, whichever way you would like the pendulum to swing.
I think, well, yeah, but one way is a workaholism. What would be like another way if the pendulum swung?
Well, I think a laziness would be the other. I think that the other extreme is laziness.
That's true.
If workaholism is maybe based to some degree in fear of man and people pleasing and seeking to please my own ego, laziness is almost it's giving up. It's saying, I can't please my ego, I can't please man, and I just want to please my desires and have this very false view of rest. So we really need to push back against both of those. And what we need to say first is that work is good and it's problematic, but also in the redeemed community, the people of God are having a different relationship with work.
Yeah.
So neither the workaholic nor the lazy is Christian.
Yeah.
Christians ought to have a very different relationship with work.
Yeah.
When you think of the way that the scriptures in Ephesians and Colossians talk about work and working as unto God, working with sincerity of heart. Even in some of those contexts where you had, these Roman slaves working for masters and all of the contextual things at play there, even those people in those trivial, menial kind of jobs are called to a sense of dignity, to say, hey, you're not actually working for your master, you're working for God.
For the Lord, and look at what your hands and your head and your heart can do. I always reference, I can't say these dudes' names, but y'all know it, Exodus 20, where it's like, and God gifted them like craftsmen work, and they started working with their hands, and I'm like, there is dignity in the fact that God has given us all these faculties to say, flourish, beautify my world, show people who the Redeemer is. It's just like one way that I think he's bringing it back to show this is the world I made and it is good, and that's the process of recreation.
I think one thing I believe that we need to work on, one thing that I think I wish I could just get people to understand, is that work itself is not a burden. And sometimes we think it's going to be, and it's almost more the fear of what I'm going to do than the actual implementation of what I'm going to do. It's like an anxiety.
Do they call them Monday scaries? No, the Sunday scaries, where there's this pit of like, this is what's going to be because I know this life required of me and I'm not going to be able to do it and I've already failed and I'm so tired and I don't want to be here. And it actually strips you from the delight of like, God's called you in spite of your limitations and even using the limitations to use your hands to glorify him and your mouth and your words. And
we can have so much fear going into, whether it's your day job on a Monday morning or whether it's a evangelistic activity with the church or whether it's discipling a one-on-one or a small group situation. We can go into this feeling like, oh man, it's one more thing on my schedule. It's one more thing I have to do. I have to give of myself yet again. But then the often, not always, but often the experience of it is very rewarding. It's very life-giving, and you walk out of that feeling better than you did.
Better and more connected. I remember in an old Elizabeth Elliot book, I remember going through a bout of loneliness. Well, we go through bouts of loneliness, but I just ride it every 3 years or so where I'm like, I think I'm going through it again. But in her book, she's like,
you're not alone.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, I feel that. And I had just moved to Baltimore in the throes of ministry, kind of like trying to figure out what to do, culturally different, so many different needs, and yet a desire. Anyway, she was saying in her book, I don't remember which one it was, but she said, like, whenever you start to feel lonely or even selfish, you should go and serve, like do something for someone. I think it just mimics what Christ has said, like, this is willingly give yourself up. And every time I've done that, I've been like, wait, what a privilege to labor with the saints. What a privilege to pray. What a privilege to learn how to carry burdens with each other. And so that's the lie I think Satan gives us, is if you work, then you will be so tired you'll have no reserves.
That's right.
But the reality is Christ is who replenishes us to go and do the work. It's like Philippians 2:11. It is he gives the will to work, the will to do those things, and that's what keeps us from complaining. And that's why we get to shine as stars, is because he's giving us everything we need to be able to do that. And I think that's when we truly find the joy, is staring at our limitations, not as excuses, but to be like, what does life look like for me on this block with 2 young kids and one on the way? How do I delight in the Lord ministry-wise? How do I even recognize the things that maybe Christ hasn't called me to? How do I sit underneath his feet?
That's good.
And do some good work.
And sometimes it's just trusting what the Lord has put in your hands. And if God has given me these opportunities to steward, and if I've taken on some things, maybe I regret, I don't want my yes to be yes, and I want my yes to be no right now. But I feel like, I need my yes to be yes, and I got to follow through with some of these commitments, even though I don't feel it.
That's really good to say, because I do think sometimes we're in making work a cuss word. We're like, well, you ain't got to do it. Just cancel.
Right.
And I'm not saying there's not a time and a place to say, man, can you free me up? What do you tell people in text? Can you free me of this obligation?
Commitment. But it should be rare, though. We really need to be a people where our yes is yes, and we're reliable, you know. And so there's a sense in which then we trust that God, this is an opportunity that God has given us. We go into it with that kind of trust. And we're also trusting God for the energy and for the wisdom. And, maybe I feel like my mind is mush from a long day. And I'm trusting, God, would you give me the sense of clarity of mind and a rejuvenation of my spirit to be able to handle this, to steward this well.
And a dependency on Christ.
That's right.
Which is the point, of it, to see, wow, he really did come to us, do the work, live a perfect life, and say, come to me all who are weary spiritually, and I'll give you rest. For us not to go ahead and step out of the order of how it even worked out, and then wonder why our souls are so downtrodden.
Because it can be a spiritual weariness,
it is.
more than a physical weariness at times. And perhaps it's because we're not really living for Christ. We're living for other things, and we're not relying on Christ. We're not trusting in Christ.
We recognize that we could actually do that. That doesn't make it easy, but it definitely makes it knowing who you depend on, the object of it, and it gives you permission to actually rest. Because for me, the struggle sometimes, am I allowed to rest? And it's the perception of what rest truly is.
So let's talk about rest then. So rest, are you allowed to rest? Can I give you an answer to that?
I hope so.
No.
Wait, what?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was like, that doesn't sound like a conversation.
You are allowed to rest.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Rest is something God did as well as work. And so if God rested,
you're okay.
If God rested, then rest is always a good thing. And it is something that is beautiful and wonderful, and it's part of actually reflecting the image of God.
That's good.
Now, our rest, however, is also problematic.
So I don't know if you're as hip as I am.
I'm not.
But there's this phrase like the soft life. Have you heard the soft life? Of course not. Honestly, if I know it, it's also shocking. But it's kind of like I'm kind of tired of working really hard for stuff, and I'm just waiting for like the life where I get to just like go to the spa this weekend or not really entertain. Even if it's not the spa, I don't want to entertain any kind of work up here. So that is the pursuit of like what is often happening here. And I don't know, I can't speak for, I don't think anyone I labor with in ministry, in our church members, necessarily would say, yeah, sign me up. But our hearts sometimes are like, when does work end? Because I'm waiting and bracing and white knuckling and anticipating like the end of this toiling.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's just kind of a phrase. I don't know if girls are just saying it. Maybe guys are saying soft life. I'm not a guy, I don't know. But it's kind of like, hey, I'm kind of done suffering and working hard and all the layers of work, and I'm kind of ready to just rest forever.
Yeah,
now.
I think that is a misunderstanding of life and eternity. You know, Paul says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. What Paul means by that is the whole of his life is to make much of Christ.
Yeah.
Now that can also be within our rest, we can make much of Christ. It doesn't mean that we are always like working bees, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we are to be at the church every night of the week. What it does mean, though, is that we live a life of service to Christ. And then for us to die is gain. For us to die is to enter into that eternal reality where we see Christ face to face. And in that sense, there is a misplaced eternity, a wrong understanding of our eschatology, where we almost feel like we ought to have heaven now. We ought to have, you know, it's what the dictators all promise, and that's utopia. You know, it's really at the heart of a lot of that. You know, I read Karl Marx a couple of years ago, and what Karl Marx is promising is rest, leisure, utopia, and it's actually, I can see why that would be so attractive to a community that's very worked and stressed. But it's a misunderstanding. It's not a Christian perspective. It's not a biblical perspective of life.
Yeah.
You know, life is laborious. And the only way we escape the curse of sin is through new bodies in the kingdom that is to come.
Recreation.
And so for now, what we do is we live for Christ. We live to make much of him. And that is the way that we handle ourselves in our 9 to 5. It's the way that we make much of Jesus in our churches and on our blocks. It's also, let's talk about rest a little bit, because it's also how we rest. And I think part of the problem is that rest is problematic. And we think of rest in terms of just simply leisure.
Yeah.
We think of rest in terms of almost idolizing this concept of just falling to pieces and having no responsibilities.
Yeah, or we don't even rest well. Like the way we rest is like it's not a hard stop to, whoa, let me take a moment and read a good book or go to sleep.
Right.
Rest my body.
Right.
Go outside. Like you've always said, like, you know, maybe not recently into exercise, but I had the privilege of living with you and your family. And I joined a CrossFit gym because I thought it would be like really cute.
You did good for a while.
Yeah, 6 months. And I asked people to sponsor me for the rest, but I can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, me neither. That's why we're not.
No, you got to hook up. His wife is a coach. It's okay. But
you can do CrossFit at the Y, kind of.
That's sort of. You can.
70%.
But all that to say, I joined it because I thought that would be a cute bonding experience for us. And it was cute. We sweated a lot. But the point of it is that was actually restful.
With you and my wife.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of the listener.
That's good. Yeah. Jess and I. And really whoever was at the 6 a.m. classes sometimes. But what I'm trying to say is it doesn't seem like that's actually a way to rest. But instead of scrolling, waking up deliriously at 5 a.m., I don't do this now, so don't take a yoke. I wake up at 5 for different reasons. But choosing to spend 45 minutes exercising my body and thinking this is really dope was way more restful than a perception of like, let me go and scroll and look at things that are too lofty for me to actually do anything about X, Y, Z. You know what I'm saying? So I do think we do need to look at how we rest, what we do to rest, and that we're not doing amusement to be like, entertain me, but we're actually doing something new, watercolor. I mean, you don't watercolor, do you?
Let me give you 2 words.
No,
I don't.
2 words.
Let me give you 2 words: amusement and recreation. So, amusement is a removal of thinking. It's a remote. It's I don't have to actually use my brain, and I can just kind of watch something. I can enjoy something. Whereas recreation comes from the idea of recreate, the idea of being renewed, the idea of being rebuilt. And so, you think of something that's like amusement versus recreation, doom scrolling on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to quote a study because you just have to Google it and you can see all the studies. Doom scrolling on Instagram leaves you more tired than when you began.
Yeah.
Versus taking a walk, maybe going to the gym, playing basketball, doing something that's, perhaps even something like maybe a good movie or a good book can also have that kind of recreating effect. But what it is it's something that would allow us to recreate our imaginations, and we come out feeling more creative than we felt going into it. We're not just simply consuming other people's material and other people's lives, leading us to regret, leading us to wanting more and coveting, greed.
Both said covetousness.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was thinking this the other day. What was I thinking? I just had a pregnancy moment. My husband and I had a couple things planned for one day, a lot of things planned, a lot of parties.
Speaking of your husband, look who just walked up here.
With a cup of coffee.
Look at this guy.
And the branding.
You got one for me too?
I got one for you as well.
Oh, thank
What
you,
is
man.
it?
Thank you.
That's just some of the
Rwanda
from Brandywine in Delaware.
Okay.
So, just thought maybe y'all could use a cup of coffee while you're talking about
This is
rest
ridiculous.
and
Welcome to the Stoop.
rejuvenation.
Kevin Greer, everybody.
Hello.
That's the boo.
Hey, babe.
Okay, I'm not gonna be awkward.
We're not going to be awkward. I'll just give you the side hug.
Thank you so
so
much.
people know that we're married.
The good Christian side hug.
We
But
need to have you on the Stoop soon.
yeah,
Sure.
we
Talk
really
about
should.
any one of the 1,000 hats that you wear.
That actually, not just because I'm married to him, but that
Yeah.
might be a good topic about like
You have a lot
joy
of
and
hats.
deacon word.
Yeah.
He does have a lot of hats. But
What were you saying about your
I was
husband?
gonna say,
Thank you for this.
now
by the way.
I'm swooning, but let me bring it back. We had a lot of things planned, and I remember telling, thank you, Rwanda.
That's good.
It is very good.
I'm sorry,
the
I didn't
baby
mean to
likes
cut you
it.
off. Go ahead.
We had a lot of things planned. I think we threw like 3 parties in one day, like different fellowship things. And that's not a brag. That's like we really like people, and I looked at the calendar. Anyway, to continue, I was like about to say, you know what? Maybe we will get to a moment where we'll slow down finally. And then I realized, nah, it's just not.
That's so true.
And we don't want to be necessarily like, if our hearts are right with the Lord, you remember those weekends? Yeah. And I was like, no, I think our life is just busy and we actually like it this way. So how do I find ways to actually to properly say, today's Sunday, we're gonna use this day, the Lord's day, to see as many people as we can. So I've just started to stop saying it'll slow down. It's not slowing down.
Yeah.
But in the middle of that, I realized like, oh, I actually like it here. And I just need to find rest here.
That's so good.
Instead of trying to be part of some other lifestyle that isn't, none of what we were doing was sinful.
Yeah.
And it was enjoyable and
Yeah.
we loved it. And I'm like, why am I fighting for this idea of
That's
like
good.
rest?
Yeah.
This was rest. And now y'all gotta leave the house by 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
day.
I think it's, and this is that different relationship that Christians have with work, is that we see it as a blessing. It's something that is, like, we've got to do something with our time.
Yeah.
And so we might as well do good with our time. You know,
Yeah, I agree.
we should either be working or we should be resting, you know, or that in between sort of like spending time with our kids and neighbors and whatever that is,
Right.
you know.
Work to rest.
Exactly. It's it's like a restful work to some degree.
On accident. I will say that
Hospitality.
Yeah.
I called my mom the other day and I said, like, she was headed to church and it was 8 p.m., wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yo, you used to take us to church with you for night service. Haitians will know. I don't know if anybody else is doing night service, but
I grew up with
Haitians-
night services from 6 to 7.
Yes. Well, Haitians are late,
Okay.
historically. So I think we're supposed to be there at 6:30. Anyway, and I said, what? You dragged us like everywhere. And she's like, yeah. We were coming to church. You were coming to church?
Yeah.
And made me think of a couple things. One, in this day and era, and I'm not coming for maintaining kids' nap time. Trust me, I got one kid that needs that nap. But in some ways, something that I think attacks rest is like the kid's schedule. I'm not in the era of running all these sports games, but the kid's schedule does dictate. And I thought, not like I actually turned out okay, but it was really sweet to be like, hey, I survived them taking me to Monday night prayer service, Tuesday night revival, Wednesday mid-Bible study, Sunday twice a day.
You were part of their schedule. They weren't part of your schedule.
And when I came, I was bitter up until 19, but when I came to Christ, I cannot tell you how fundamental that lesson was, that they said everything we do will come second to being with Christ in his body.
Yeah.
They worked. There was no, like, my mom didn't stay at home. She had 3 jobs. It's not a brag. It just is actually like, ooh, something is there in the middle of that. So that's my plea for, we're in the season now where we're loud in everybody's prayer meetings. And I'm shushing and, you know, changing poop, and we're rotating. But that's the thing to say, how do I actually think about rest in the middle of this chaos?
I think some of the cultural missteps that we would have.
Okay.
Thanks for stopping by.
Coffee.
Thanks for the coffee. Some of the cultural missteps would be that we.
Sorry.
It's all right. We allow our kids to dictate our schedules.
Yeah.
I see that with a lot of families where, you know, sports schedules, they feel like they have to get their kids in every single program, you know, every single dance class, every single extracurricular activity, every single science fair. You know, like, there can be a sense in which we're actually burned out because we're idolizing our kids' success, and we're not even allowing them to be kids and just simply have some free time and play in the alley and throw the football. And also what we're doing is, in that, we're so often removing the kids from all of these life-giving opportunities with the church and hospitality and
So take that as a freedom step. That's not like a yoke. It's just like
No, you don't have to do so much for the kids. You know, like, get them in a sport. You know, I think I'm a huge advocate of sports, but we got to be careful that we do not fall into idolizing their athletic achievements, their intellectual achievements, what schools they get into. And so for that reason, I think a lot of families today are very tired. I think also fear of missing out.
Oh my goodness. You coming for me?
FOMO. I'm just saying, Steph, you and another brother in our church, of who I won't say his name, but we're both very close friends with him.
I think he knows who he is.
He knows who he is. Fear of missing out is a big deal.
That's true.
Saying yes to everything just because you're afraid you're going to miss out. Can I keep going?
Enslaving to be. Yeah, go ahead.
Screens dictating life. Falling back to the Instagram, falling back to the Netflix, just the doom scrolling. Or the last thing I'll say is this: wrong time, wrong place. What I mean by that is we are resting when we should be working and working when we should be resting. Meaning, we don't know how to just work consistently and work hard and get things done. You know, be fully 100% present when it's time to work, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's in a one-on-one discipling or whether it's evangelizing or whether it's at your day job or
it's true.
Or with your kids.
And so then you feel misplaced because you've escaped throughout the day.
You're constantly escaping, and then you're behind on things, and then you got to play catch up when you should be resting. So if we can just learn to
ain't sleeping.
Let's work when it's time to work so that we can rest when it's time to rest, and then let's rest well. And even if you only get 2 minutes of rest, that 2 minutes of rest can be so much more recreative and recreating. It can be so much more rejuvenating than 2 hours of rest spent in frivolous, leisurely kind of sort of ways that are just simply amusement and scrolling and screens.
So could I ask, I guess I can, because you're not going to say no. Maybe you could say no. But as we're just thinking about wrapping this up, I kind of have the church planter in mind this is not just for church planters, but my heart. As we're trying to revitalize and plant churches right now, and we just had a prayer meeting, it's fresh on my mind. So there is the church planter maybe that's lazy, that isn't really doing anything, not doing anything, but it's like the Lord is going to feel this work. But I think for the more church planters I meet, and their teams and their wives are like grinding. What's the hope for as they hear us say, work well, rest well, have your 2 minutes? Like, what does that mean as someone's like, oh, you're saying that because you've got an established church and everyone's serving. Everyone is not serving. That's, Or some may know you, Joel, and you happen to be a very driven individual that finds that does not need the same amount of rest. You do need rest. You do sleep. But I can say, like a little bit more rest in other pockets. What does that look like to keep, I think, people from comparing themselves here, but genuinely entering into the rest that God gives them?
Yeah. Well,
what do you give them in 30 seconds time?
One thing I'll say is to live a life where we get up in the morning, we care for what we have to care for, we care for our kids, we work hard during the day. Maybe that's in the home, maybe that's out in the workplace. We then come home, we spend time having family worship, perhaps spending time with our church family, and then resting, and then saying, okay, it's time to cut it off, and I'm entering into a time of rest. Now, in the midst of all of that day, there are so many 2 minutes of rest. There are so many opportunities to rest well and to not do these unproductive behaviors of escapism.
That's good.
And so rest well when you can rest, and then work when you can work. So that's the big thing. But then the other thing I would say is we have to trust God with the opportunities He's given us. And I think so often when we're actually working too much, especially in ministry, there can be a bit of a frantic kind of labor where we're trying to make something happen that God is not giving us. And maybe we can make another episode on that alone. Because I think part of this is having a view of something that I should have, something I should achieve, some level of success.
Something I got to put in a newsletter.
Yes,
somewhere.
and I can't rest until that's achieved. And so and so even when I'm home, I'm not resting because I'm looking at that thing. And so this is, can we do a second episode on this? Because we got to talk about
let's go
having
for
a right view of what God has given us and being content and trusting that.
That's good. Hold on.
I was told you should always pray when an ambulance goes by.
Yeah, I totally do that with seconds.
Do you?
Yeah.
Did you just pray?
Yeah, I did in my head, but I wasn't going to put it out there. We usually pray, like, Lord, to wherever they go, that someone will be saved. And for the fire chiefs, I've learned that fire chief is different from the ambulance.
Yeah.
Turns out having a son that's 3 that's obsessed with these things is teaching me. He's like, that's a fire chief. Anyway.
Praise God.
Yes.
Why don't we do this?
Let's do this.
Let's call it a day. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to work and rest.
Here's
and
Rwanda.
Let's do part 2 on contentment and actually understanding that we do not need to go after things that God has not given us to go after.
That's true.
And that in that we can rest.
Here's to a quiet life in the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. All right. Hey, thanks for joining us on the Stoop.
Thanks for listening to the Stoop Sessions. Be sure to catch us next time. As One Hope exists to build healthy churches in the inner city, check us out and connect at www.onehope.gives.